Hello everyone, thank you for joining me for another video. I'm your host Sheena from Sheena Loves Stories, and today I'm going to be talking about a book that I guess I had higher hopes for. And it is called Close By, and it is written by Blake Pierce. I read this through an audiobook, so it's about 6 hours and 18 minutes long, published in 2025, and it is the first book in the Carrie Black Horse mystery series by this author. I looked at this author after the fact. I just kind of passively looked up this author because I had questions. I had questions. And this author writes so many books, has so many series out there. And I felt like when I realized that, I was like, oh, this kind of an aha moment. Like, I get you. Okay. So this isn't, I understand why it felt plug and play. Because that's the thing I have about it. But this book takes place near where I was born and raised. It takes place on the Navajo Nation in Arizona. We don't get an actual town of where it takes place, and I think that's just because the author didn't really know a lot of the towns or anything like that, didn't want to put anything up on for towns and stuff because that would be a thing, you know? I was born in Gallup, New Mexico, and I was raised in a small town in New Mexico that was on the reservation. So I'm familiar with the reservation. Like that's where I come from, you know? And I was born on the New Mexico side. I stayed mostly on the New Mexico side, but we also lived on the Arizona side of the Navajo Nation. For those of you who do not know, the Navajo tribe or Diné tribe is the largest Native American, or I don't know what you people call us, like Native American, Indigenous Americans. It's changed a few times. The largest tribe in the United States. The reservation covers 3 states. We are a more sovereign nation than most. We have our own president, we have our own executive branches, legislative branches, we have our own police force. We're kind of I don't want to say a big deal, but it's a big tribe and things are a lot different. And one of the things that I had a question with this book, I know it was published in 2025. I was just, what year was this book supposed to take place in? Like, I wanted to know. I kept asking that question. Nobody answered me. Nobody knows. The author probably wouldn't answer me even if I was on social media, but I'm not. So I'll just sit here and wonder. But I'm going to tell you about this book because I listened to it, and the second half I was listening to it because I just wanted it to end. I wanted to know how the story ended. So let me talk about it for a little bit, and I apologize for if I'm not happy with it. This book, like I said, takes place on the Navajo Nation. It takes place in Arizona, apparently 2 hours away ish from Flagstaff, Arizona. And this book follows Carrie Blackhorse. Carrie Blackhorse is half Navajo and I think half white. Her father is an FBI agent and lives currently in this time frame, lives in Flagstaff, and her mother recently passed away. Her mother stayed on the reservation, and it never says what her mother did, but it does say that her mother was working on things and that she was questioning certain parts of the culture, getting stories from the culture. But it never says what she did. Was she a teacher? Was she an anthropologist? What did she do? Why was she gathering these stories? What was she wanting to do with these stories? Why didn't she know these stories? She grew up on the reservation, and we are told repeatedly how Carrie's maternal grandmother is a healer who tells all of these stories, does all of these things that a healer or the author thinks the healer would do. I'm like, well, then why doesn't her mother have these stories already? Why doesn't she know them? What's going on? What did her mother do? We don't know. It never tells us. And it vaguely throws in throughout the book that her mother was researching something, and Carrie is very sure that that's what got her killed. The medical examiner and an autopsy and everything determined that she died from natural causes. But Carrie is very determined that that's wrong. Because why would it be true? So her mother passed away. When her mother passed away, she inherited her house on the reservation. So she left her job as a homicide detective at Phoenix PD and transferred to tribal police, where she is a homicide detective working with the tribal police. Well, the book tells us also repeatedly that she has an 86% clearance rating on her cases in Phoenix PD. So the book tells us she's super smart. She tells us in her mind in the book that she is very smart, she is very analytical, she's very logical. When her parents divorced when she was very little, she lived with her dad off the reservation and would come back on the weekends, but was mostly with her grandma. Not so much her mom, but kind of her mom. It's whatever suits the story at that time. But she's super analytical. She wasn't raised traditionally, so she doesn't believe in Navajo traditions, Navajo beliefs. She doesn't have that type of cultural connection. And I'm telling you all of this stuff about Carrie. The book doesn't start off talking about Carrie, but I want you to understand like where she's at. Because the book will just beat you over the head with it in the beginning part of the book. So we're going to get that out of the way. That's Carrie's character type. She was raised mostly by her dad. So she is mostly leaning towards her white side, if you will, and is learning from him all of these FBI techniques. And she's like, I learned strict FBI methodology, and that's how I have an 86% clearance rate. And I don't know the national statistics of homicide detective clearance rates. I know it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, depending on all kinds of stuff. But I'm like, is this good? Is this bad? I was a military police officer. Our clearance rates were a little different. But then I'm like, I watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I don't know. I don't understand. And we're never given anything other than that's better than everybody else. Like, really? What do you mean? How is that better than everybody else? What are you talking about? Is that just in Phoenix because it's a larger city? Or, I don't understand. But I digress. The book tells us she has an 86% clearance rate. 86% clearance rate on her homicide cases, making her one of the better people ever. And she is moving from Phoenix to the Navajo Nation. Not a town. I don't know. We don't know if she's in a town, if she's off in the middle of nowhere, and all of these type of things. And I'm like, well, if she's in the middle of nowhere, she's also not going to be in a place with running water and electricity, because a large part of the Navajo Nation doesn't have running water or electricity to these smaller homes. So again, what year is this? Oh, hubby's got a look on his face. All I hear is Zeke from Bob's Burgers. You wouldn't believe the national statistics. Oh, information. I love it. Thank you. Okay. So, hubby found this out. The national homicide clearance rate in the United States has experienced a long-term decline, falling from a peak of 93% in 1962 to approximately 50 and 52% in the early 2020s. Recent data indicates a slight recovery with a clearance rate of 57% in 2023 and estimated at 61.4% in 2024. 4. Okay, the current status by 2025, a national average was reported to be nearly 58%, with some cities like Los Angeles achieving rates as high as 101% due to lower homicide volumes and reorganized investigations. Okay, for Arizona specifically, the statewide homicide clearance rate in Arizona is 64%. This figure is derived from cumulative data showing 18,490 homicides, with the 6,695 remaining unsolved. Phoenix specifics. The Phoenix Police Department has reportedly significantly higher clearance rate recently, achieving a 92% clearance rate for homicides in 2023 and clearing nearly 74% of murders in the most recent reporting year. Statewide context states that while Phoenix performs above the state average, other Arizona counties show a wide variability, with some areas like Apache County reporting clearance rates as low as 9%. That makes sense. I've been to Apache County. National comparison, the national average homicide clearance rate has hovered around 57 to 61% in recent years, meaning Arizona's historical average is above the national mean, though recent yearly fluctuations have seen declines. So, reading that first one, I was impressed. I'm like, okay, higher 50s and 86% clearance rate. Okay, yeah, you know what? That seems like a really good average. That's something not to be prideful about, but I could understand why you would get a big head about yourself. But looking at the Phoenix specifics, like, okay, that excitement for her came down. I'm like, get your shit together, Black Horse. What do you mean? You're talking about your FBI trained mind from your father making you like fucking Clarice Starling. I can just read people and figure things out type of approach is not as effective as you think it is. And I think you should just, humble yourself a little bit. But those are the numbers. But again, begs the question, when was this supposed to be? What year is this book supposed to be in? Like I said, she's living on a reservation in a town. Probably not. I don't know. The book doesn't say. If she's living in a town, yes, there'll be running water and electricity because the federal government has provided small towns with running water and electricity and housing as a part of a treaty that was signed in the 1800s. Well, not the electricity part, just it was very vague, and they were just like, this is kind of all you get. You're welcome. But if she's not living in a government built house in a small town in Arizona, and she's living closer to Canyon de Chelly, which is a national park, that is in the middle of nowhere. I love those areas. Those are in the middle of nowhere. Most of the area in towards the middle of the Navajo Nation, away from these larger towns or even towns in general, do not have running water and electricity. They do not. There has been a recent push in the past 20 years to get running water and electricity to all of these areas, but it has not happened as quickly. My grandfather's house was built with plumbing and electricity ready to be hooked up because he was told when it was built that there will be running water and electricity routed to his house very soon after it was built. As of, well, let me see, try and get my timeline together here. In about 2015, was when they started building the power lines to go out to where he was at. And his town was not a ridiculously small town. And it was off of a highway, about 15 minutes off of a highway. 2015 was when his house was finally when they were starting to put power lines by his house. He passed away before he got running water and electricity at his house. So if she's in a house by herself in the middle of nowhere, there's not going to be running water and electricity. There's not going to be cell phone service. Like, that's one of the things when people go back to the reservation, they don't have cell phone signal and people start to freak out. That's why government initiatives, which gave the Navajo Nation adults iPads and laptops, failed miserably because they're like, no, 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 we're going to give them something so they can have some free education. They can educate themselves with the internet. Let's give them iPads. Like, okay, how are they going to charge it? How are they going to get on the internet? You going to provide that too? And they were like, you know what? We're going to provide that too. Never did. Still not there. Still not there. In the year 2026, that's still not fucking. I haven't lived in New Mexico in in about 10 years now, and I still know it's not there. You know what they did with those iPads and laptops? They pawned them and they sold them to GameStop because GameStop was one of the only stores at the edge of the reservation. I digress. I went off on a tangent. This book made me heated. This book made me heated for a few different reasons. Obviously, I am Navajo. I am a full-blooded Navajo woman. I was born and raised. I was born off of the reservation, but I was raised mostly on the reservation. I know a lot of the stories that are there. I wasn't raised by a grandma healer, but even passively, you know these things. There's a lot of things that I grew up with that I'm like, okay, I understand why I was taught the way I was taught. I was raised more traditionally. Not very traditionally, but more traditionally than a lot of other people. So you're talking about my homeland with stories from my people. I'll not be that happy if you botch it up. Not only that, I love mystery novels. I love mystery novels. I love figuring out a story, the whodunits. Those are great. True crime is one of the things that I consume a lot of. And fictional crime is something I consume a lot of. I love mystery novels. I love mystery novels where you're set in the shoes of a detective or even just a law enforcement officer. Somebody's put in these things. Like, I get that. I love that. That's so great. I like using my brain. This book had some shoddy detective work that offended me. I can understand. Like I said, I looked up this author based on the name and what I saw. I don't think this author is native. I don't think this author really researched a lot about my tribe or our stories. There's stories out there about my tribe that are readily available, and she kind of just stuck with that. He, I don't know. Blake is an ambiguous name. Blake stuck with the more surface level things. I can forgive that. If you're not from there, that's okay. I understand that. You're ignorant. You don't know any better. I would have preferred you research more things before you wrote a book, let alone a series on it. But again, I can forgive that. But if you're telling me you have in your catalog over 50 mystery novels, and this is your detective, like, I'm personally offended. And it bugged me so much. That bugged me more than the thing. Like I said, the traditional things, the cultural things, I rolled my eyes at a lot of it. But I'm like, this person doesn't know any better. They don't know. But you're a mystery writer. I thought this was this person's first book. It was not, to my shock. So, all of the tangents, hopefully out of the way. Sorry. But also, I needed you to understand this character. Like, she was grown up more on the white side, and now she's moved back onto the reservation. Let me get back to the character. And she doesn't feel like she will be welcomed because, one, she is a woman. So she's worried that she's going to have these men that are not going to be as helpful, or to understand that she got to her 86% clearance rate as a homicide detective all by herself. with the training from her dad, uncle, and a mentor that's mentioned once very late in the book. And she's also half Navajo. So she's like, will they accept me if I'm not fully Navajo? I don't know if this culture will accept me. And I don't believe in their superstitions. So I don't know how well I'll be in this job. But her whole point of moving back was to kind of figure out what happened to her mom. Her whole plan was to investigate her mom's death and then to get the fuck off the reservation. That was her whole plan. So that's the type of character she is, and we're introduced to this type of character in the first half of the book. Like all of that condensed into one thing. But the actual book, like I said, it's a mystery novel. The book starts off, like I said, with the murder. The murder is of a white geologist. This geologist has gotten approval from the tribal council, which there is no tribal council on the Navajo Nation. We have the Navajo Nation Council, but that's our whole legislative branch. They oversee laws and budgets and stuff like that, and they vote. There's 24 members of them. They're elected. All you have to do is live on the reservation, be 25 or older, and be voted in. It's not a council of elders. We don't have that. But they also don't oversee this. If you want to have a permit to go onto a sacred site or go into a more restricted area of the national parks, which have all the ruins on them and everything, you have to apply through the BIA and the National Park Service. FYI. But this character magically got approval from the tribal council that does not exist to go to this sacred site that nobody's really been allowed at, and he wants to take pictures. And the only stipulation that the tribal council gave him was he needed to have a Navajo guide that would be able to take him to the area and kind of watch him to make sure he didn't desecrate the site or anything like that. So he decided, yay, I got this. Yeah, I got this. He got approval for it. He was really excited about it. The whole point he wanted to go take pictures of this sacred site is called Monster's Hand. It is 5-finger formation, like coming out of the ground. And as a geologist, he found out that this site may have some specific type of iron oxidization that makes it super special and different from any other type of rock formation on the reservation, and may be a new scientific find. So he's super excited about that. He is applying for tenure at, I already forgot the school, university in Flagstaff. That's the only town we have a name for in this book. But he's from Flagstaff. He's applying for tenure, and his boss told him that his application was a little weak. But she was really nice about it, but his application was a little weak, so he needed something to beef it up, to provide more value to the university, or he probably wasn't going to get tenure. So they decided that he was an amateur photographer, so he loved taking pictures, everything. So he was going to go to this sacred site on the reservation to get pictures of this sacred site in the full moon, because that's where you can really see the red iron in this rock formation. And then he was going to have all those pictures submitted to an art gallery. And then from that art gallery, they would display all of it. He would sell some of the pictures, but he would also get his name out there as an artist as well, and then put that onto his application for tenure. I don't know how long the application for tenure is, but I'm like, you guys are acting like this whole thing is like going to happen in a week, but it's a very long process. Whatever. I don't care. That was his whole plan. So he got approval from the tribal council. I guess after he got approval from the tribal council, he finally told his guide his plan, which was to go onto the sacred site in the middle of the night on a full moon. And that's when his tribal guide was like, no, you cannot do that. Which again, I feel like if you're putting a proposal to a council or anything, you would have to tell them, the day and the time that you would be doing the thing, especially since this was his whole plan was to go there in the middle of the night on a full moon to take pictures of this sacred site. But that's not addressed. He magically gets approval, and then his guide just backs out when he decides or when he finds out where he wants to go and what time he wants to go. And he tells him that that's a sacred site and that that's a place where the veil is thin between the worlds and he can't go there because it's dangerous. And the archaeologist is just like, that's crazy superstition to this Navajo guide. And the Navajo guide's just like, well, I'm not taking you there. We're not doing that. No. And so the Navajo guide thinks that he's not going to be able to go because he needs a guide. He requires a guide to go. Therefore, he will not go because the tribal council said you must have a guide. Obviously, that does not work. He goes. And he takes all of his equipment by himself. And while he's on his way, he's just kind of like, I'll show you guys. These are going to make my career. He doesn't seem to be having a happy life. Like, we get little snippets on his walk to this sacred site of how he got a divorce and his teenage daughter hates him, which I'm like, your teenage daughter hates everyone. She's a teenager. And so he goes there. He starts taking pictures of this sacred site, and then something attacks him. The book emphasizes that something very strong and very fast, humanoid, but not so quite human, attacks him and kills him. And then that's when we're introduced to Carrie. Carrie is on the reservation. She's running, ruminating about her mom, everything, and how she's going to fit into this whole Navajo Nation tribal police thing. She meets her grandmother there, who's the healer, who got a ride out to her house from a mail carrier, which there's no mail carriers on the reservation. There's no mail carriers on the reservation. There are like 10 post office on the reservation that everybody has to use. There's no mail carriers, but again, whatever. Apparently, this mysterious mail carrier picked up this grandmother while she was delivering mail and then took her to her granddaughter's house and then went back to deliver mail. And she tells her grandmother is made out to be this very weird caricature of a fortune teller, which bugs me. Again, culturally, that bugs me. That really bugs me. But she's a fortune teller, so she just shows up to give Carrie encouraging advice. She has visions, and she tells Carrie these visions throughout the book. There's only like 2 of them. But every time her grandmother shows up, it seems to be a plot device to give her some mystical means of furthering her understanding of the case, trying to find the killer, blah, blah, blah. But her fortune cookie grandma shows up and tells her that her mom was working on something that may have something to do with stuff that they're not supposed to talk about, but is probably connected to something that she's going to have to deal with on a case, but they don't know. But she's glad she's back on the reservation. The whole conversation's nonsensical. It was pretty much just to tell Carrie that you're Navajo. Don't forget that. Follow your heart, your gut type of thing. Carrie goes to the tribal station and meets her brand new partner. She's been there for a few weeks, but she's finally been assigned a partner. Her partner is Detective Sosi. Detective Sosi has been born and raised on the reservation. He has talked to a lot of the community members. He's in the community. He was he was raised traditionally. Again, the book starts him off as he was raised traditionally. He's very stoic, but he speaks Navajo. The book tells us that he knows the elders of his community. The book tells us that he also that's exactly. Oh, yeah, that's all the men in this book that are Navajo are like that. Yeah. Yeah, I was just like, I feel like you're this close to giving them a headdress. I feel like anyways, yes. But that's the type of character the book tells us he is to begin with. They get told that there is a body that was found by some hikers on the national park, and they're like, okay, they go. On their way there, Carrie wants to question him because they're brand new partners, but he hasn't spilled his personal secrets to her. So she decides that, what if he doesn't like me? What if we don't get along as partners? He hasn't told me all of his secrets. We've only had professional, polite conversation so far of knowing each other. And that reminds me of what the writer did in fucking Vasquez, where she's like, oh, I'm in the military now. These are my brothers and sisters. This is my new familia. So I need to be super honest with them and tell them every deep, dark secret I have right off the bat. I just met these people. This is our first day of basic training. Let's all share our deepest, darkest secrets to each other. Like that's not how that works. That's not how that works. It's not how that works in the military. That's not how that works in law enforcement. But she's just like, he hasn't told me his deepest, darkest secrets. Maybe he doesn't like me. So he tells her this weird thing, like she'll need her FBI training, but he looked into her career at Phoenix PD and she is super great at her job. She has an 86% clearance rate on her homicide cases. So that's what they need here. They need somebody who knows how to read evidence. And she's like, but what if the community doesn't like me because I'm not full Navajo? And he's just like, be sensitive. It's just like, it's ridiculous. But she feels better after this conversation because he's opening up to her. This big stoic native man is opening up to her now, so there can be great partners together. Detective partners. But it's kind of ridiculous. Again, I'm like, what year is this taking place in? You know how many full-blooded Navajos there are? Not many. Not many. I was one of the very few when I was going through high school in the early 2000s. Most Navajos on the on the tribal registry are not full-blooded Navajo. And my tribe has always accepted people who are not racially or ethnically Navajo as long as you are on tribal land, respecting tribal culture. I have so many people that I knew of as a kid who were white, black, Mexican, or the Apache one. That was the only one. They're like, he's Apache, so you still have to watch him. We don't care how well he speaks Navajo. You have to watch him because he's Apache. Because, you know, that tension between the tribes. But every other racial person that came on they always got married to a Navajo woman. They always moved on to tribal land and they just adopted the culture. It was very weird to know that, like, they spoke perfect Navajo and they lived like Navajo lived. So they were accepted by the tribe. It was never like, oh, you're halvesies. Like, what? What? Again, what year is this? What year is this supposed to be? Like, it may have been like that back in the 60s, 70s, but that's not the norm. That's not the norm. But that's her biggest fear, is she won't be accepted by the community because she's only half Navajo. Like, okay. Okay. They get to the site of the body, and as soon as she gets to it and as soon as she finds out about it, she's like, oh no, the FBI are gonna come in and take this case from us. And he was like, yeah, probably. But the FBI is gonna show up here. And again, I'm like, what year is this? Because there was a point in time where only the Navajo Nation tribal police were allowed to have jurisdiction on the reservation. And if any entity outside of that wanted to have contact on the reservation or has a case or anything like that, you had to have the FBI on site. Like the FBI had to work with the Navajo Nation PD. No sheriffs were allowed on Navajo Nation land. No state PD. No local police and everything. It was a big thing. I remember when I was a kid, that was a thing. If the cops tried to come after you while you were in town, you haul ass onto the reservation. They can't touch you. So everybody knew where those roads were, where that border was, because we grew up. Like, yes, if a cop is chasing you, you get onto that reservation. They can't touch you. And if it's serious enough, a tribal officer will show up to your house because all the tribal officers knew where everyone lived. They knew all the families. And like that was the big thing and that was changed. I want to say like 20 years ago. It was around the time I was in high school. That changed because it just became a bigger thing. But I'm like, what year is this? What year is this? And they're like, oh, well, it's on a national park. So that's why the FBI is going to show up. But as soon as they were talking, they're like, oh, the FBI is going to show up. They're just going to take this away from us. And they get there, they see the body, and they see Carrie gets to take lead. Like, she kind of tells, so, like, again, with the whole 86% clearance rate, we're given this whole, she knows how to do detective work better than her partner, who is just a Navajo Nation tribal officer who's been in that forever. So she's just like, oh, my city ways, I will process this scene. And he's like, okay, you want to take lead, you take lead. And she starts processing the scene, and she's like, there's ritualistic elements in this killing here. I think that this person was killed in this way, probably around this time, but I can't be sure. We'll have to have a medical examiner out here. And while she's talking, the other detective's walking around the perimeter of the crime scene, and he's the one who tells her about the ritualistic elements. There's a big part in this story where, again, in the beginning, she's just like, I don't know if I'm Navajo enough to be a part of this culture. And he's telling her at the beginning, because she's just like, it was a ceremony that went wrong. That's what this was. And he's telling her this wasn't a normal ceremony. And she's like, what do you mean? And he's like, look here, and look, he's pointing out to different parts of the herbs that were used, the placement of the body, and he was like, it looks like somebody tried to do this type of ceremony, but they did it wrong. And he's very quick to tell her, any Navajo who knows how to do this ceremony would not do this way. This is a perversion of the ceremony. And he explains every little bit to her. And I would assume he did that because she had this whole thing of how I'm not Navajo enough to be like, will the community accept me type thing. And he's just like, oh, well, let me tell you about this parts of this ceremony and how it's wrong and how it should be if it was going to be this part of the ceremony. However, it wouldn't revolve a dead body. And she's like, oh, okay. She's like, okay, I'm absorbing this information. He wasn't robbed. His neck was broken and his like throat was kind of ripped out. And the Emmy confirms everything she said. And they're like, all right. She tells she's like, you're better with the locals than I am. You interrogate the witnesses. You question the witnesses. You've kind of figured out what's going on here. And I'm going to go to Flagstaff to check on this guy's office because he wasn't robbed, so he had his ID there. And she's like, oh, he was a teacher at this university. Let me go to Flagstaff. I'll be gone for a while. She goes to Flagstaff. She goes to this university, and she meets his assistant, who is Navajo. And his assistant immediately tells her, after she tells her that his body was found, she immediately's like, oh no, I know why he died. That's because he went on to Navajo Nation land and went to the sacred site in the middle of the night on the full moon to take pictures because he wanted to put that as a part of a gallery, and my cousin just happened to be his guide and told him he wouldn't do it because it's on sacred site in a place that has the veil thinning between the worlds and it was dangerous, so he wouldn't do that. And she was like, I knew he said he wanted to go and do that in the middle of the night with nobody around him, but I told him, oh, you shouldn't do that. And no, oh no, he did it and now he's dead. Almost that same type of vibe in that paragraph. It was a whole paragraph when she talked. She just went forward. And she takes Carrie to his office, and she goes to his office and she finds all of the stuff like, oh, okay. So yes, he did get permission from the tribal council to go onto this land, but he did it illegally because he wasn't supposed to not have a guide. But she got the name of the guide, which just happened to be this girl's cousin, and that's what I kept saying. It was like, oh, this is my cousin. This is my cousin. I was like, I feel like this author didn't realize everybody's cousin there. If you're in the same age bracket, that's my cousin. If you're older, that's my aunt or my uncle. If you're really older, that's my grandma, that's my grandpa. That's just how Navajos be. But apparently, bloodline, legit cousins, allegedly. So the cousin, she found out the name of the cousin, the guide, and she's like, all right, cool. She tells Sosie that that the cousin is there and they need to question the cousin, and he's like, all right. But he tells her she needs to hurry up and come back because the FBI has shown up. And the FBI agent that showed up is Agent Daniels. Agent Daniels was her father's partner in the FBI. When he was in the FBI, he's retired now, and now he works with a museum. Doing what? I don't really know, but it has to do with Navajo culture. So her dad left the FBI, he retired, and then he started working for this museum as a part of Navajo culture-ish stuff in there. But Daniels did not retire, and he is still a field agent, and he is now coming to the station to participate in this investigation because he found out it was a white person that died. So he wants to take the case over. And she's like, oh no, I know who that is. That's Daniels. He's like an uncle to me. She gets a text from her dad as she's leaving, and she's like, oh no. My relationship with my dad is so contentious. But he sent me a text message. She doesn't have a good relationship with her dad because her dad got remarried to somebody who is younger than him. And that woman is also white. But I'm like, how long have your parents been divorced? Because if you're saying you spent your weekends as a child on the reservation, how long have your parents been divorced that you can't like somebody your father married? Like, even, I think it's like, I don't even know when he married her. Don't even know when he married her because the book doesn't tell us. It makes it sound like he married her fairly recently within the past few years. But then I'm like, why would that bother her? If her parents were divorced when she was a kid. I'm a child of divorce. Like, what do you mean? But she doesn't like her new stepmom, so her and her dad don't talk anymore. The last time they saw each other was at her mother's funeral, and they're very cold and distant, and we learn later on in the book that he's always been very cold and distant because he was an FBI man and analytical with her, and that helped her be a better cop, but they didn't learn how to communicate with each other. So when he got married to this other woman, she couldn't communicate that she didn't want him to be married to anybody other than her mom. And then her mom died, and then she just didn't talk to him after that because it was too hard for her to talk with him because of how she felt about her stepmom. But her dad texts and says that he has information about the case and he needs to talk to her. She tells him later, I can't do it right now. I gotta get back. And so he's like, all right, tomorrow let's have coffee. She goes back to the station. Daniels is there, and Daniels is like, all right, the FBI needs to take over this case, essentially. And she's like, well, this is on Navajo Nation land. Tribal police have jurisdiction. And he's like, well, this happened on a national park. That's FBI jurisdiction. And this was a white man. So we got to get on this case. The FBI has better resources than you do. And I don't know if a day went by or whatever, because it just got kind of blurred together. But there's another murder. In this next murder, we get to meet this person. I think her name was her last name was Delgado. I don't remember her first name. She is an activist. She has spent her life, once she found out about the Navajo Nation and everything, she moved closer to it and found out about mining right disputes, because parts of the Navajo Nation are very mineral rich. So there's been real life mining operations. The biggest thing that has been was the uranium mining that destroyed a lot of our tribe, but that's a whole different thing. This is different. Apparently, it's generic mining. I don't know what they're mining for, but this person, this Mrs. Delgado, she's an activist. She investigates mining companies and takes them to court, gathers evidence, takes them to court, does like a whole class action lawsuit against these mining companies if they are encroaching on Navajo Nation, on the Navajo Nation. She gets the people on the land that and near it, anybody that might be affected by their livestock having tainted drinking water, all that stuff. Like, she's trying to do good for the people of the tribe. And she has noticed that there is this one mining company that may be illegally mining on the reservation. So she's on the border of the reservation and she starts finding these tracks of these mining equipment and stuff. And she's like, aha, I got you. And so she starts taking pictures, gathering evidence, all of that stuff. And it is not quite early morning, but still dark, but almost dawn. And she gets attacked by the same thing that attacked the geologist. And also emphasizing how this thing is humanoid, but extremely fast and extremely strong. And it chases her. And she loses all of her equipment. It chases her. She thinks she's safe for like half a second, and then she's killed. And she is also placed in a ceremonial, ritualistic type way. Carrie and Sosie are called to the site. The FBI agent tags along, and then once he sees the body, he's like, all right, we're taking over this case. And she's like, you can't do that. And he's like, yes, I can. I'm taking over this case. You have 2 white people that died on Navajo Nation land. This is our jurisdiction. This is probably a serial killer. We're taking over the case. He keeps saying the Bureau has better resources. We'll do a briefing later, everything like that, but we're going to take over. There's the same ceremonial type of aspects to this. Sosie is kind of telling her still what things are wrong about it, but not as much as the first one. She's still like, okay, this is still wrong, right? And he's like, yeah, this is still wrong. Still explaining the things that are different, the different herbs that are used and stuff like that. And he tells her that he has to inform the elders of the tribe because these killings are taking place in a ceremonial like fashion. And she's like, okay, well, you do that. I need to go to the museum. But before she can go to the museum where this person works, this person was an activist, didn't have an actual job, but he's like, I need to find out if people know more about Navajo culture and ceremonies. Before she can go, she has to do a briefing for the police station, everything. She gets the briefing together. She's like agonizing over how to psychologically help people understand the killer that they're after. And she's finally satisfied with her briefing. She's like, all right, I'm going to present this. Agent Daniel shows up with a bunch of other FBI agents, and they are like, well, we have our own briefing, so we're going to do this. She looks to her captain, Captain Yazzie, and Captain Yazzie's just kind of there, very passive for a captain. Just lets the FBI come in, everything. Not until Carrie bolsters him with her resolve later on in the book, and then he becomes a little bit more assertive and actually does stuff. But in the beginning, he's passive. He's just like, well, they're here and they're gonna do the thing, so let them do the thing. Not detective, Agent Daniels tells this group of Navajo Nation tribal police officers and a handful of agents that he brought with him that they have a profile ready. That this profile states that these killings are done by a traditional Navajo man, probably in his 30s, who hates white people and is using ritualistic elements. And Carrie is upset. She's like, they're not. They're not. He's not doing a ceremony. These are wrong. These things are wrong. And he was like, well, if you look at ritualistic killers, they often add their own touches to thing, and it evolves with them crime to crime. And she tells him his profile is wrong, and he keeps saying, "Are you questioning FBI methodology? Your father would be so upset with you right now. How dare you question how the FBI does things?" And like, again, what year is this? What year is this? And she keeps talking about how they are going to lose their person. And not only that, is that Daniels has no cultural sensitivity to the Navajo tribe. Which, again, I'm like, what year is this? Because Agent Daniels has been working on and off the reservation for as long as she's been alive. You would assume she's in her 20s. So for at least 20, this is 25 years. 25 years. He was a partner of her father who retired, and he's still working in field cases. So about 25 years. 20 to 25 years he has been working on and off the reservation. Are you telling me that this FBI agent has not seen fit to adapt or learn anything about Navajo culture while working on the reservation? Like, that's not how normal human behavior works. Like, that's not. But that's what they're saying, is that he's just very ignorant of Navajo culture, traditions, or anything having to do with Native tribes. And he's just decided that because white people were killed and there was a ritualistic pattern, that his behavioral analysis of this, and she keeps talking about him being a behavioral specialist. And I'm like, I don't think he's a behavioral specialist. He's not acting like a behavioral specialist, because he just said, white people are dead, the natives did it. It was a man because they were killed with very aggressive force, so a man killed them. And they're white, so it was a Navajo man. There's ritualistic elements to each of the bodies. They were placed in specific positions, and they had herbs and things around them. So it's a traditional Navajo man. And I'm like, okay, that's, I get, what year is this? What year is this? But whatever. He does that. He's taking over their case, and she decides that she needs to go to the university/museum in Flagstaff to find somebody who knows more about Navajo ceremonial cultures and traditions, because with Sosi telling her all the things that were wrong with the things, she's just like, oh, okay, so it's a person who knows head knowledge of ceremonies from the Navajo, but has never lived through ceremonies with the Navajo. So it's probably somebody white. It's somebody white who's doing this, and they're copying Navajo traditions. So that's what I need to know how a white person can find out about ceremonies. So she decides she's going to go to the museum. And she has Sosie distract the FBI agents and try to kill time while she goes to Flagstaff. Again, Flagstaff, the book says once that it's about 2 hours away ish. And she goes there. She goes to the museum. Her father works at the museum. She's like, you told me you had information about the archaeologist, and he doesn't really have information about the archaeologist. He tells him that he tells her that the archaeologist talked with him about the structures and their cultural significance, and he explained what she already found out what the archaeologist was doing there, but she's acting like it's all new information to her. And then he asks her how she's doing, and she tells him everything about the second case. This is an open investigation, but like, why would she tell him everything about the open investigation about the body that they just found? And I would assume it was because he's an FBI agent, because remember, she has this whole contentious relationship with her father. He married another woman sometime after him and her mother divorced, and that's giving her daddy issues. So she's like, I'm going to talk to him about this case. And she tells him everything. And he gives well, maybe it's this. And she's like, well, Daniel says this is his profile, that it's a traditional Navajo man because white people were killed. So obviously it's an angry native killing the white people. And her father's just like, well, it could be. He's not wrong because FBI methodology. I'm like, what methodology are you guys talking about? What do you mean FBI methodology? I need some understanding here, because all of the things that they keep saying is FBI methodology is stupid and nonsensical. But he's like, with FBI methodology, he could be right. And she's like, no, he's wrong. And all of her interactions with Daniels, with her father, sometimes with anybody who has an opposing view with her, she gets very emotional. And she's like, I'm fighting really hard not to start screaming at this person. And I'm like, I need you to control your emotions and be a little bit more professional. And I need you to not talk about open cases this openly with people who are not part of these open cases. Like, how is she praised as one of the best detectives in Phoenix with an 86% clearance rating by being so open about it? But I was like, okay, whatever. Maybe it's just because he was an FBI agent in the past that she was just like, maybe he can provide some different insult. It sounded like she just wanted to vent about Daniels and wanted her father to tell her that Daniels was wrong. But she knew he wouldn't because of his FBI methodology. Like, okay. And he tells her there's somebody at the museum who is going to be able to help her understand how a white person could know about Navajo ceremonies. There's a person at the museum who does classes on it, and this has been her whole life study. So he's like, all right, let me introduce you to her. And she's like, I don't need you to do that. And he's like, well, she's very closed off and will probably not talk to you if you don't have somebody introducing you and make it a lot easier on you in your case. And she's like, all right, fine, whatever. And she goes to talk to this woman. This woman is very open with her about what she does. She goes around and she documents Navajo ceremonies and puts them into her classes and lectures on what they mean, what they do, all of this type of stuff. She does make a weird statement about how she got divorced from her husband of 3 years. Well, not her husband. She got divorced 3 years ago from her husband of 35 years. And she's been having a lot of problems moving on from the divorce. It didn't fit the character that was written in there. It was just kind of pushed in there at the very end. And I was like, that's a weird thing to push in there. And I'm like, why is she doing that? I'm like, well, and I was hoping that the detective would engage with her more on a human level to get some more information about her, because I'm like, that's odd. That's odd. That's out of the ordinary. Why does she say that? You should talk to her more to get her to talk more about it. She doesn't. Carrie doesn't. Carrie shuts up as soon as she says it and stops all forms of communication until the person is uncomfortable enough to make a joke about it. But she tells her all of the, like, not all of the things. She tells her that what she does. Carrie went there to find out how a white person could know about Navajo ceremonies. And this professor teaches on Navajo ceremonies. So she was expecting to, I assumed, this was my bad, this was my fault. I assumed she was going to talk to her about how somebody could get all of this information, and could have been a student, could have been a professor. She is determined that this is a white person that has done this. So, like, okay, who else teaches this? Is this a common thing? How often are these lectures? Do you go into exact detail? Can you show me your course notes, your class notes, something like that, so I can understand what type of person is engaging with this information, so I can have this information for part of my case? Carrie does not do that. Carrie tells her, I need to show you some pictures. And the person, I don't remember her first name. Her last name's Redford. Redford tells her, like, okay, I don't know if I can do this, but I will try. So Carrie takes out evidence pictures of the crime scene. And when Redford sees them, she has that initial, like, a visceral reaction of, I don't know if I could do this, because there's dead bodies in these pictures from the crime scenes. And instead of getting her opinion or being like, I need you to look at this and tell me what you see, what do you, in your opinion, as a professor, what ceremony is this supposed to be a part of? What ceremony is this person trying to do? Can you tell me from looking at this what you, as a professor who's dedicated their whole life to this, can see? See, that seems like a detective thing to do, right? Right? Carrie doesn't do that. She shows her pictures of the crime scene and points out what the ceremony was that the person was trying to do, and what elements were used in this ceremony, and how everything is wrong. Every little bit and piece that is wrong, she tells her. And if you see here, this is wrong. This herb is in the wrong place. Do you see this cornmeal? It's broken here like this. No, you're not supposed to do that. You see how the body's placed here? It's placed facing this direction. And no, it should be like this if they want to do this type of ceremony. She sits there and just tells this professor all of the things. And she tells her everything about the victims. She tells her everything about the crime scene, about this open case. It's been like 3 days and they have 2 bodies, and she's just spilling her guts out to this professor about everything she has learned and observed on these cases. And the professor's like, oh, I don't know. Would you like a copy of my student list? I can do that. I can give you a copy of my student list. And Carrie's like, yeah, maybe that'll help. And then leaves. And she's like, what kind of detective are you? Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And she bumps into her dad on the way out, and her dad's like, we should really have dinner. You, me, and Linda. Linda's her stepmom, who she has trauma about because that's not her mom that's married to her dad, even though they've been divorced since she was a little kid, but whatever. He's like, maybe you should have dinner with me and Linda. She would really like to get to know you, and we should be better at being like a family. We should get to know you. You need to meet Linda. Linda wants to get to know you. He's a little heavy-handed with it, but the book does tell us that he's been trying to get her to meet with his wife for as long as they've been married, and she's just like, oh, no, I don't like it. You getting married to somebody else who's not my mom has caused me deep trauma, and now I can't even talk to you like a normal person. And she's just like, oh, maybe I gotta go. I'm getting a phone call. Bye. And then she does get a phone call from Sosie. Sosie tells her that she needs to hurry up and get back to the reservation because the FBI agent Daniels has found a suspect, and now the suspect is going to be brought in for questioning. And the FBI agents went there in went there with full battle gear and assault rifles to this house on the reservation. So she goes back to the reservation and she gets to wherever this house is. The house is the cousin of the guide whose cousin was the assistant of the geologist who was supposed to be taking him to, like, the cousin who was the assistant and the cousin who was the guide that was supposed to take the archaeologist to the site. His cousin is a traditional Navajo man, and the FBI is like, oh no, it's this guy because he's violent. His violent offenses was he got into a conflict with a white person who was trying to take pictures of a coming of age ceremony that was happening at a sacred site on Navajo land. And so he got in a physical altercation with that person because he was pushing him away because that person was trying to take pictures. And I was just like, what are you talking about? Like, that's weird. Coming of age ceremonies don't happen on sacred land like that, but they happen, all you need is a hogan. They happen on family property. But that he got in a fight with him, so he's like, okay. And he was at the tribal council meeting that approved the archaeologist's permit to go to the sacred sites. And he was at that meeting and he was very verbally against this archaeologist going to the sacred sites because he said he was a modern day grave robber. And he opposed that. So, like, oh, that's a connection. That's a connection. And he was also a part of a lawsuit that the activist was on, except they were on the same side. He was trying to help the people that he was also trying to help. Like, him and his family were affected by mining, and they were suing the mining company. She was helping them sue the mining company, except he never met her because she was just trying to gather evidence for them to do, like I said, a class action type lawsuit. So they're like, oh, he's connected to both of the victims. He's a traditional Navajo man, and he's violent because he pushed away a white person trying to take pictures of a coming of age ceremony. So they go to his house. They show up in, like, they don't show up in tactical gear, but they have it very visible with their rifles, like, in their front seats of their SUV, which I'm like, that's weird. Who does that? Not any law enforcement agency I've ever seen, but okay, that's what they do. They pretty much have their assault rifles on their dashboards, is what it seems like. And so he sees the rifles and locks himself in the house. So they have a standoff situation. Carrie gets there, and Sosie's telling her about the connections that they had, and she's just like, Daniels is gonna hurt people. He is so consumed by his whiteness and his FBI methodology that he is not seeing things clearly. It is not this person. She's like, it's a white person doing this. She gets to where Daniels is, tells him he's wrong. They're using a megahorn to try and get this guy out. And they're like, no, he's a big man. So he could have easily killed these people. She finally confronts her captain, telling him that he needs to, like, this was still their jurisdiction, that the FBI has not formally requested to take over the case, so they can't be here. And I'm like, well, hold up. Are you telling me that the FBI has to formally request and get approval to take over this case that has happened on a national park on the reservation? Why didn't they do that? Why didn't you bring this up? 2 bodies. And now Now, when they have this one house on the reservation with this one person locked in, they're surrounded the house. They have helicopters there. Apparently, there's news stations from places. Places. The Navajo Nation does not have local news stations, by the way. Like, there's no local reporters. There's some people who are on the radio that call in and they kind of are like local reporters, but not really. But they don't have newscasters. All of a sudden, there's a newscaster from a city. Like, okay, what city? Why is that newscaster there? Why isn't anybody telling this newscaster to back the fuck up? Because she's right there, right by the HQ for the FBI. I'm like, I see problems here, but whatever. But you're telling me that the FBI really doesn't have jurisdiction there because they do not have the approval to have this case. But you guys have been rolling over for them this whole time. This whole time. To be nice? Or what? Like, because they're white FBI agents that just came in? Like, that didn't make sense. That didn't make sense. And this was over halfway through the book. And I was like, okay, so now you're telling me that the FBI really didn't need to be there. That they're only there to be the bad guys without being the bad guys. Okay. And the captain, this is where the captain is finally like, oh yeah, I have control here. Huh. And then Carrie tells him, I need to go up there with his cousin because I know his cousin. And look, his cousin is right there yelling, trying to figure out what's going on. So we can just take the cousin that's yelling, me and Detective Sosi, and then walk up to the house, just wearing body gear and not having any weapons at all. And we'll just talk to him and we'll be able to bring him out. And the captain's just like, oh, yeah, I guess I have jurisdiction here. This is my case. Yeah, we'll do that. And then this is the point where the captain's like, FBI, man, you guys are hurting this community and this community's perception of the FBI. You will no longer be part of this like this. You'll still be a part of the case. You'll still do all of this stuff because the FBI agent's like, I have jurisdiction here. I'm like, really? Because a paragraph ago they said you didn't. Who would it? These lines need to be cleared up a lot quicker than they were. They were never cleared up, by the way, in the book. And so the captain's like, yeah, FBI bad. You did a bad thing. I just finally snapped out of it because this woman came over here and told me to snap out of it. So I did. And they walk up with his cousin. This cousin talks to him in Navajo and English and tells him to come out. And this is one of the things that I was annoyed with the book. There is a preconception of what what Native men are. There's a lot of I think of how, like a stereotype of, a man with long hair just flowing in the wind, very stoic and talks in a deep voice, very, yeah, like that. Yeah, my native man over there has his hair flowing in the wind if there was any wind. Hey, stand in front of the fan. How's that stoic face? My dad calls it the native glare. It's just that look that natives have, and that's a learned look, by the way. We're taught from a young age that that's how we have to look, especially around white people or non-people on the reservation, because if not, they'll take advantage of you. We're taught that. That's just, you learn that as a kid. In this book, it has the stereotype of all of these Navajo men are tall, broad-shouldered, have a long flowy hair, are just very stoic. They have deep voices. They're very careful with what they say. They don't say much. And none of them do. None of the men in this book, none of the Navajo men in this book really talk a lot. The one cousin yelling, what the hell is going on here? at the FBI agents is the most emotion we get from any of the Navajo men here. And I'm just like, you've never met a Navajo man, have you? The only thing that's different is they have long hair, but it's like she remembered, oh, it's in a traditional bun. Like, okay. But yeah, they're all of the Navajo men are like that in here. And so he talks to his cousin in Navajo and in English, tells him to come out. So he comes out very stoically, very, very stoically, very proud, and walks with them. And they're not there to arrest him because he hasn't done anything that they can arrest him for. This was all to ask him a few questions. They take him back to the station and they start questioning him. Except when they're Carrie requests to question him first, and the Captain Yazzie is just like, "All right, sure, you go ahead and do this. This is your case." She questions him about where he was, what he was doing. He's like where he was during the second murder, and she tells him there was a second body found. Where were you at between this time and this time? And he was like, "Oh, I was out running." And she was like, "Okay, can anybody prove it?" No. He's like, "I saw some people there, but I don't know their names." And she's like, "All right, well, where were you at last night?" And he's like, "At home." So can anybody prove it? And he's like, "No, I live alone since I got divorced." Like, okay. And then she tells him vital information about the cases. She tells him that he was brought in because he had a confrontation with not the archaeologist, the geologist. And he tells her that he was at the tribal council meeting. He opposed this person being on Navajo land because he would not be respectful of the sacred land. He had no respect for the Navajo culture. That's why he didn't want him to be there. And then she tells him how this guy died. And then she tells him all the ceremonial aspects of the body at the crime scene. She's just telling everybody all the case details that are going on. And I'm like, bitch, do you not know how cases work? You're a detective. You were one of the top Phoenix PD detectives with an 86% clearance rate. Why are you telling everybody the details of everything about the case? She does. She tells them all the things, and then she goes out of the interrogation room. She goes to the captain and to Agent Daniels, and she's just like, "This isn't the guy." And Agent Daniels like, "You're too soft on him. Didn't your dad teach you anything? I'm going to interrogate him now." And she's like, "Okay, but it's not him." And Agent Daniels goes in there, and he's telling him that he's the guy. He's telling him that he's the one who killed everybody. And the guy he sees a white man coming in, so he's very stoic again. He sits back away from the desk and tries to keep his answers to one-worded answers. This Agent Daniels is like, "I understand it. You were mad. You were mad. You didn't mean to kill them, but you did." And this guy's like, "No, I didn't." And then he keeps twisting everything that this guy is saying to be like, "Oh, you did it. You did it. Are you telling me you killed him? Because you killed him. You killed him. I know you killed him. Why don't you just tell me you killed him?" I'm like, what kind of interrogation is this? This man, she keeps saying that he's a behavioral specialist. I'm like, is he though? I don't think so. Is he real? Has he ever interrogated people before? Has he ever interrogated Navajos before? Like, what are you talking about? This is a really odd interrogation. And then he stops talking and he's like, "Why should I talk to you? You're not going to listen to anything I say." And I'm like, why are you not asking for a lawyer, my dude? Everybody knows that. Like, again, what year is this? What year is this supposed to take place in? But he's questioning him, and then she gets a hunch that something's gonna happen. And she's just like, "Okay, something's gonna happen. It's gonna be a thing, and so we need to I need to check some things out." She tells the captain that she's gonna go check on some things, and he's like, "All right, cool. You do that." There's a third murder. The third murder is an archaeologist. This archaeologist is not a good dude. He intentionally goes to sacred sites to get artifacts so he can sell them. Like that's the kind of guy he is. And he is murdered. I can't remember if he was murdered before or after this interrogation because this interrogation was so ridiculous. But this site has, it was definitely after she talked to Redford, but this person was killed and it doesn't tell us a lot about him. I feel like the author at this point just kind of was like, I just need somebody else to die. Doesn't really tell us anything about what was really going on. He was on Navajo Nation land. I don't remember where. I don't remember what he was doing. But he was on Navajo Nation land and he died. He was murdered. It was brutal. It was mostly knife cuts. And the body was positioned in the similar ceremonial ways, except everything was correct for the ceremony that the person was trying to do. And I kept yeah, I'm like, what ceremony are you talking about? No ceremonies like this require a dead body. But you keep saying, oh, it was done correctly. I'm like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I think this one was before the interrogation, but like everything's happening right on this one. Everything is correct on this ceremonial killing. And so she's trying to think about what's going on and she has to have a break. She has to have a break. She's thinking too much about things. So she decides to go out, take a walk, just like woosah. She calls her partner, her mentor, who taught her when she first got to Phoenix PD. This mentor is named Maria. Maria has been a cop for like ever. And she calls her because she's like, I'm so stuck. I don't know what to do. She calls Maria. Maria tells her, hey, you are so smart. You're so smart. You know how to do this. Remember the first case you ever worked? What did you do? You went back to the first part of the case when you had more information. Remember that? That's what you do. That's how you solve cases. Don't you remember that? You've always did that. You've always been really good at that. You need to do that right now. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? She needed to call her mentor to tell her this? What kind of detective is she? Like, are you telling me that throughout this whole case, she was just like, I'm not going to look at previous murders with new evidence that I'm finding out. Okay, you know what? Whatever, maybe. But she decides to be like, what changed? What's new in this case? And you know what? This last case, everything was done correctly. Again, I'm like, correctly for what? For what? For what ceremony? What are you talking about? I digress. She's like, everything was done correctly. Why? Why did that change? When did that change? That changed between the second and the third murder. That's so. What happened differently between the second and the third murder? I know I can do this because my mentor Maria told me I could. And I'm so smart and awesome. I know. I told Redford what was wrong with the previous ceremonies. And I told her specifically what needed to be done correctly to make a ceremony of this type work or be correct. She's like, oh, it's the little scientist person at the museum. That's who it is. And she tells Sosie this, she tells Daniels this, and they both. Sosie is very, again, stoic, off to the side. He's like, maybe it could be, maybe not. Daniels is like, you have lost your gourd. Are you telling me a woman in her late 50s who is very small, weak, and like petite ripped a guy's head so hard that the neck broke? He's like, no, you are not paying attention to the profile. And she's like, your profile is wrong. And he's like, this is my FBI methodology. Are you questioning FBI methodology? And he keeps going back to that. It's really annoying. And she's like, no, I'm right. It is this little old white woman who did it. I am right. I am 1000% sure. And he tells her she's again lost. She's not thinking correctly. So he goes back off to go do things. And she tells Sosie that she's going to go question Redford. She's like, she lives outside of town, but she's, outside of Flagstaff a little bit. She's like, let's just go question her. He's telling her, he's like, you haven't slept in like 3 days. He's like, I haven't slept in a few days. He's like, if this is a thing, he's like, we can question her, but let's wait until the morning. We need some sleep. We need some time to process this information and stuff. And he's like, all right, let's question her in the morning. And she's like, no, there's going to be another body. I know it. I feel it in my gut. So we go now before she kills again. And he's like, you don't know there's going to be another body. And she was like, I know. So she was like, well, I'm going to go with or without you. So you can figure the fuck out for yourself. I'm going to go. And so he's just like, fine, I'll go get my bag. And they go to question Redford. They get to her house, and Carrie is like, she's not here. That's so weird. So she breaks into this person's house, and even Detective Sosie's like, I didn't see this. I don't know anything about this. And she's like, it's fine. It's all right. I'm right. I'm correct at this. I'm like, oh, my dude. I'm like, well, if you are right in this, I'm like, anything you find in there now is void, cannot be brought up in a court of law, which a large part of police work is finding out like what happened, the truth, everything like that. But a very big, large part of police work is gathering evidence and all of these things to prove what happened in a court of law. That's why you collect evidence. That's why you collect evidence in a certain way. That's why you preserve crime scenes. That's why when you interrogate or question somebody, you do it in a police station so they can be recorded. That's why all of these things happen. And that's drilled into you. I was a military police officer. I wasn't even working with civilians, and this was drilled into me because I was held, like, you're held to a higher standard. Things are happening federally on this level, so you need to make sure that everything you do, say, or are investigating can be proven, can be recorded, and you can speak to it in a court of law. Anything that cannot be done with that is not really worth doing. You have to do it a different way. It changes the way you look at things. It changes the way your mindset is. This bitch just breaks into this old lady's house and is like, it's fine. I'm a detective. And she goes in there and she finds a map of the Navajo Nation, and it has little red pins in it. And there's 4 or 5 little red pins in there. And she's like, oh, well, these are where the murders happen. And these 2 haven't had murders on them yet. So that's where she's going to go. That's where she's going to kill people. Like, to remind you, these pins are on sacred sites. This woman, over whole career, talks about ceremonies at sacred sites. It would not surprise me that she had a map of the Navajo Nation on her thing. So she's just like, all right, well, we're going to go to these different sites. She's like, she's going to murder somebody right now. I know it. I feel it in my bones. We both need to go to 2 different places. He says that when they left, he said Detective Sosie said he was going to get his bag, but they go in 2 different vehicles. I don't know if he took another vehicle to her house, which makes no sense, but he probably did because they leave to 2 different locations. And on their way there, she decides to call Daniels and tell him what's going on. He tells her she's crazy. It's not really happening at that. She's like, no, I have evidence now. I have evidence that can prove that she is the killer. Because every piece of evidence they had so far has been circumstantial with everybody. And she's like, I have physical evidence now that can prove it. I'm like, no, you broke into this woman's house. You didn't have a search warrant. You didn't have probable cause. Nothing like that. You broke into this woman's house. Any evidence you find in there is going to be thrown out. In a court. It's going to be thrown out. Her lawyer is going to have a field day with this. But she's like, no, I found all the evidence, so I'm right, you're wrong. So I'm going over to these 2 different places. Well, I'm going here. Detective Sosie's going here. We need you to send backup. And he's like, you're going into the middle of nowhere. It's going to be hours before we can send backup. And she's like, well, send it anyways. I'm headed out there. She ends up going to the exact right location where Redford is. Redford is the killer, by the way. And she is tracking down a hoodlum, a little hoodlum graffiti artist tagger person who decided that their goal of what they're going to do is take spray paint and tag sacred sites on the reservation. That's their whole deal. That's what they want to do in life, I guess. And she found that out because she works at a museum slash university. It keeps using museum and university interchangeably. I don't know what the hell this place is. It's probably a mixture of both. But in the cafeteria, this kid, because he's, late teens, early 20s, this kid was speaking very loudly about how he wanted to go onto the Navajo Nation, go onto sacred sites, and tag them up. Why? We don't know. How is he going to do this? We don't know. But he was going to do that. So she decides she's going to go and stop him. I was like, okay, but Daniels was right. How did this little old woman kill these people? And at each murder, it emphasizes that it was a humanoid thing with immense strength and non-human sounds, and it was very fast. At the first murder, I immediately thought Skinwalker. But then I was like, that's too obvious, right? Hopefully it's something different because that feels like a cop-out. No, that's what it is. It's Skinwalkers. So let me tell you what happened. In this book, the lore of a skinwalker is completely different than what it is in reality. That's okay. Again, this person doesn't know. This person doesn't know. This author doesn't know. I wasn't going to hold it against them. I was annoyed at it. It's kind of like Wendigos and other like cryptid type things that come from native tribes. It's, you hope somebody's going to get it right, but you don't hold it against them when they don't, because you're like, how would you know? How would you know? Anyways, skinwalkers in this universe are spirits that can possess you. And when they possess you, you turn into something like a werewolf. That's the gist of it. 3 years before, Redford got a divorce from her husband. Her husband left her. They were married for 35 years. He left her. It made it kind of sound like he got married to somebody younger, but it doesn't say. Doesn't matter. They got divorced. Remember, she brought that up when she was talking with Carrie. Her and her husband got divorced. When they got divorced, she went into an extreme depressive episode. She was having a hard time processing the divorce. During this time, a spirit of a skinwalker entered her and possessed her and causes her to do things that she doesn't want to do. And so I think she's an anthropologist. I think that's what she is. Like, thinking about it now, I think that's her job title. Being an anthropologist and having all of this information about Navajo culture and ceremonies, she decided she was going to perform ceremonies, or a ceremony, to transfer the skinwalker spirit into something else, or into somebody else. And that's why these murders have been happening on sacred lands. That's why the ritualistic elements were there. Her whole goal was to transfer the skinwalker spirit to somebody else. And so she was using all of her knowledge of Navajo ceremonies and sacred sites and things to try and accomplish that. But she just ended up killing the people, and it never worked. And so she was getting desperate. And one of the things that Carrie found in her house was a bunch of notebooks that she had been keeping, documenting her transformation and all of these weird things that were happening to her. So what she did was she decided that she was going to try and transport this spirit into somebody else. She went to the museum part of this university and broke in to some exhibits and stole artifacts that were recovered from a Navajo site, a ceremonial mask, ceremonial knives, herbs and things, and like from this whole exhibit. She stole those and she used them to perform these ceremonies. Carrie finds her at this place and she's attacked the little tagger dude. Is getting away. She sees Redford and Redford is still Redford. Like she's so small. It's like a small little woman. And this thing is talking to Carrie and saying like, oh, Redford's not here type of thing. Kind of reminds me of Deadites from Evil Dead. And the Skinwalker's talking to Carrie about how she would be a better sacrifice. And I'm like, okay, how is this ceremony supposed to work? If you're trying to tell me that you're trying to transfer a spirit of a Skinwalker to another living human being, but these are sacrifices to the Skinwalker, or I'm like, or is it just the Skinwalker is just using her? I don't know. It never tells us. I'm like, I would like some more clarification on that, please. It never happens. But the Skinwalker is talking to Carrie in the very Deadite type voice of saying, Redford's not here, and you're going to make a great sacrifice. I'm going to wear your face. I'm like, really? I think you just took that out of an Evil Dead movie. But the thing attacks Carrie. Carrie's trying to fight it off. She's losing. And she's like, no, how can Redford be this strong? And she's rationalizing it in her head. We take time out of this fight scene for Carrie to be like, oh, this must be adrenaline. When adrenaline things happen, people can have stronger muscle reactions and it deadens their pain receptors so they don't really know that they're getting hurt. And like we're going through this whole process during this fight. And I'm like, I don't need you to tell me that. I don't need you to tell me that. I would like you to just tell me the fight scene. But they tussle. We don't really know what's happening. She tries to get her service weapon out, and it gets knocked out of her hand. Daniel shows up in the nick of time. And while the Skinwalker is focused on Daniels, she pulls out a medicine pouch that her grandma came up or gave her at some random time, to further on the plot because fortune cookie grandma. And she pulls out this medicine pouch and pushes it against Carrie's skin. Redford's skin. Redford starts freaking out and it's like it's burning her. So if you just imagine in like exorcism movies when they put like holy water or a crucifix on the person that's possessed, that's what it reads like happened to Redford when this medicine pouch was placed on her. So that breaks a little bit of Carrie almost dying. Daniels goes and tries to arrest Redford. Redford attacks him. They fight. Carrie jumps in on the fight and nothing's really working. And then she's like, oh, I need the medicine pouch. For some reason, this works. Oh no, where'd it go? It fell on the ground. Let me go find it. She finally gets it. She touches it again she throws it to Daniels and tells him to put it on Redford's skin. He does, and then she magically turns back into a human person. Like she starts being Redford again, and she's like, "Oh, what happened? Did that thing take over again? Oh no, what did it have me do this time?" And they arrest her. Daniels does this whole little speech at the end of the book about, you know what? Maybe the FBI needs to grow and evolve. Maybe we need to grow away from our FBI methodologies and try this new way. You know what, Carrie? You're the reason we're going to do that. I was like, that's stupid, but whatever. Sosie also gives her a whole little speech about that too, about how her mix of being a white FBI raised person and her mix of being a Navajo person is just what the culture and community needs, because she has two different sets of eyes. She sees things traditionally and from a white person perspective, and that's what the community needs. But Redford was the killer the whole time. And they don't the author doesn't come out and say that she was like a skinwalker. The Carrie and Daniels rationalize what happened, and they said that she was in a psychotic break, and the psychotic break gave her super strength and super speed. And she pleads insanity, so she'll probably be in an institution for the rest of her life. And there's just saying like, yeah, no, she has psychotic disorders, and that's what happened. And one of the things that really bugged me too, not only, well, a lot of the things that bugged me in this was halfway through the book, like I told you, Carrie's whole character in the beginning was like, I don't know if I'll be accepted into this culture. I'm not Navajo enough. Halfway through the book, immediately she starts being like, oh, I remember going to ceremonies with my healer grandma on the weekends when I was on the reservation. I remember that they wore ceremonial masks and garb and had ceremonial knives. So obviously this white person would have that too, right? And she immediately starts remembering ceremonial things that our ceremonies and blessings and things. Like she remembers all of this stuff just halfway through the book. In the first murder, Detective Sosi had to explain everything to her. What everything means, why it was wrong, what type of ceremony they were trying to imitate, and even what type of like herbs and things that were around. He had to stop and explain all of this to her one by one. Halfway through the book, she's an expert. Like she's a little baby healer herself. And I was like, okay. Those were choices. Those were all choices in this book. I said, I can forgive not knowing the culture, not knowing the traditions. I would appreciate some people spending more time looking into this. When I looked at this book after I finished reading it on Amazon, because I was trying to figure out if this, like what an ethnicity this author was, because I'm like, this is kind of, it made me cringy. Trying to figure out what this author, like their background. Couldn't find anything about this author except for the whole list of books that she or he has written. But I saw some reviews of people saying this is one of the best books that happened on native land with a native tribe. And this is the new Tony Hillerman author, and they were so excited from this. I looked at the pictures of all of these people leaving reviews like this, all 5 stars, all looked very same, very pale with red or light brown hair. And I was like, okay, have you read Tony Hillerman's books? I have. I like his Jim and Chi books, like his Leaphorn and Chi. Those are detective novels that he wrote. Like Tony Hillerman lived near or on the reservation for decades and talked with actual Navajo people on the reservation. He learned Navajo to talk with people, so he could get the traditions right, or as close to right as he could. So he could get the fears of things and the way that people talked and the way that people would react in these type of situations. He was so entrenched into the culture of it that the University of New Mexico has a dedication to him and his family for their preservation of some Navajo stories. Like that's how much he researched what he was writing about. This person is not the new Tony Hillerman. This person is not. All of the things that were happening traditionally in this, most of them were made up. They were made up. And it was ridiculous. And I can forgive that. You're not born in there. You didn't live there. You don't know any of this. I can forgive that. Like, okay, you don't know anything about my culture or traditions, but you're making a mystery novel about it. Okay, that's fine. What I cannot forgive is this terrible detective. This terrible, terrible, terrible detective. I don't like this person as a character. If this person was a real person, I would not like this real person. I would say that they were very arrogant and emotional and too sensitive for what they were doing. And maybe they should probably find a different career field. But everything that this person did this character did in the book, trying to be a detective as their first murder case, homicide case on the reservation. I'm just like, wow, I don't think you're a good detective. And I was never a detective of homicide, but I can. I like to solve puzzles, and it was just all terrible. It was all terrible. It was all terrible. I knew the Skinwalker was going to be a Skinwalker from the first murder because that's all people know of that's scary from Navajo culture, which is sad. There's way more scarier things than that. But Mike, you got all the lore wrong. All the lore again. Could forgive that. I can't forgive a terrible detective in a detective story in a murder mystery novel. Like it was ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. I did not have fun with this book. And it was only 6 hours, and it took me days to finish this book because I kept stopping it and being like, well, what the fuck is this? What is this? What are you doing? What are you talking about? Enough that I had to stop my husband doing whatever he was doing to be like, this character did this. This character did this. This is what's happening. And then I would have to stop reading it because I would get more annoyed. Let's go through my call pile score. The characters in this book, like I said, they were not great. They were not great. I didn't like the whole detective character. There was just, it was so many stereotypes and a lot of different things, and I was just like, have you met normal people? Have you met normal people? I don't think you've met normal people. So I didn't care for them. I'm gonna give it a 2. Some of the characters made me laugh, just with the ridiculousness of their stereotypes, but some of them made me laugh. So I'll give it a 2. I'll give the characters a 2. The atmosphere of the book, again, it was a murder mystery novel that happened in the on the reservation in the middle of nowhere. That's where I grew up. I love the way the reservation is. It is very beautiful out there. They do talk about how beautiful it is without telling you how it's beautiful, which is sad. Like, again, if you want to compare Tony Hillerman to this author, Tony Hillerman does a really good job of describing how different the reservation is from almost any other place. Atmosphere, it was bad. It was bad. I give that a 1.5. The writing was bad. The writing was, I'll give it a 2. It was not great. It was not great. It was not the worst book I've ever read writing wise, but it was not great. The plot was terrible. It was a terrible, you get a 0 for the plot. I did not like it at all. Intrigue. I was very intrigued at the beginning of this book. That's why I got it. And I kept listening to it. And I was like, you know what? Maybe it'll get better. Maybe it'll get better. It did not. So I'm going to give that a 2.5, which is mediocre. Logic was bad. It was bad. Like, it's the 1.5 for logic because it was just bad. I'm like, this detective is a terrible detective. You should not even get the 86% clearance rate that you are so proud of, that you bring up all the time. No, that wouldn't have happened. Like, no. Entertainment, it was bad. It was bad. I did not really enjoy this book, but I kept having to listen because until the last, like, 2 hours, I was like, maybe it'll get better. Maybe it'll get better. Because we don't find out that Redford's the Skinwalker killer thing until the last, like, hour and a half. Maybe hour. I don't know. It felt like the book felt way longer than 6 hours. But in the last little bit, that's when we find out. That's when all the things click for Carrie and everything. And I'm like, okay, maybe that'll be good. But it wasn't. It wasn't good. It was terrible. It was bad. And I kept holding out hope, and it just kept getting worse. So that brings out the call pile score to a 1.5 for this book. A 1.5 out of 5. Should you read it? I don't think so. I don't recommend this book. If you want a murder mystery novel that takes place on the Navajo Nation, just pick up a Tony Hillerman novel or watch, what's that show on AMC? Dark Winds or something? I don't know. My dad watches it, and he's very critical and cynical of people writing Navajos as well. So if he's still watching it and he's just like, yeah, it's a good show. You can watch that show, read a Tony Hillerman novel. Do not read this book. Do not support this type of ridiculousness. But that's it. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I hope you guys have an amazing day, night, afternoon, whatever it is where you are. I hope that your current reading journeys are way better than this. I'm trying to clear out the holds and the things that I've checked out on my library app through Libby. That's why I listened to this book. It was an audiobook that I had through Libby, and I'm trying to clear it out because I am on the second book of the Eisenhorn series in the Warhammer 40K franchise universe, and it's a really good book. I read the first one, it was really good. I'm reading two different trilogies right now, and I just want to focus on those. So I try to get this one out of the way. So I hope you guys are having better reading journeys than I am with this. Thank you guys so much. Don't forget to do all of the YouTube things, like, subscribe, all of that, and I will talk to you guys hopefully very soon. Bye.